we start instead with a little bit of fun based on the big sports news of the week. Desmond Bane traded this week by Memphis to Orlando in a trade that shocked some because Orlando gave up a boatload. I mean, 4 picks. So you watch Twitter explode over the concept of, oh my God, Luka was only worth 1 and Desmond Bane was worth 4. But I digress. Like, so you're asking me, why are we talking about this on a football podcast? Well, it raised a little bit of fun, and C-Rob's right on. If anybody in the NFL is actually worth 4 first-round picks in Desmond Bane's spare. So let's start there, C-Rob. You've been talking to people around the league. I mean, all right, Mahomes. I'll give you Mahomes. Who else is worth 4 first-round picks?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because, I got a lot of response on this right away. It was like a lot of guys wanted to talk about it. I think it was just because it was so buzzy, but I sent out a ton of texts. I had, 14 guys responded to me between coaches and executives. And I think it was just one of those moments where everyone's looking at the trade compensation and 4 first-round picks, a pick swap. And anytime that happens in any sport, if you're in the NFL, the first thing you think about is, all the major trades that have happened historically. We think about like Eric Dickerson, who was dealt for 3 first, seconds, additional capital. Herschel Walker, another guy, I think it was, 3 firsts, a bunch of players. Mike Ditka giving up an entire draft plus for Ricky Williams. We just don't see these insane monster deals anymore. And so I just posed the question. It was really simple. I said, hey, I'm thinking about this. Is there really any NFL player right now that's worth 4 first-round picks and maybe a pick swap? Like, is there anybody out there that you could see having the gravity to draw that kind of capital? And interestingly enough, out of the 14, 6 said a flat no way. You don't give up 4 firsts for anybody. Doesn't matter who it is, what quarterback it is. The picks are just too important from a building standpoint. There's a lot of comments like that. 8 said Patrick Mahomes. And of the 8 that said Patrick Mahomes, let me make sure I get this right. 3 of those 8 also said Josh Allen. 2 of those 8 also said Joe Burrow. 2 of those 8 said Lamar Jackson. And 2 of those 8 said Jayden Daniels, which I thought was kind of interesting that after one season, some evaluators viewed Jayden Daniels as being worth 4 first-round picks. But it's an interesting thought when it comes to the NFL because the picks, and this is what a lot of individuals said as I was kind of unpacking it, is just that NFL picks are not even close to, in terms of the value, there's no real comparison with NBA picks. Like, they all kind of picked apart where the NBA shelf drops off, where you can't find starters in the NBA draft in the first round. And they all kind of said the same thing about the NFL. Like, those first round picks are all expected to be building blocks on, really, when you roll out 22 players, 11 on defense, 11 on offense, you just can't surrender picks at the top of the draft when you have so many holes to fill.
I just want to play devil's advocate a little bit because, 4 firsts for any player is a little ridiculous, but it does stun me that 2 out of 14 think Lamar Jackson's worth 4 firsts.
Yeah,
1 out of 7. Lamar Jackson should be a 3-time MVP. He's a 2-time MVP. One of the greatest quarterbacks I've ever seen. And if in some fantasy world, right, you trade for Lamar Jackson, you're going to be drafting near the end of the first round. You're going to have one of the best teams in football because you got Lamar Jackson. Let's put this into practice a little bit. I'm just going to give you 4 late first round picks from this year. Are you telling me you would rather have Malachi Starks, Tyleik Williams, Josh Connerly, and Maxwell Hairston rather than Lamar Jackson? Really? I'd take Lamar Jackson. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird. I think Lamar Jackson's worth that. I also heard Lamar Jackson couldn't be worth 2 firsts when he's a franchise player. And no way he could get a contract.
I mean, that
this
actually
isn't
happened,
owners
Frank.
colluding.
That actually happened.
That was one of the stupidest things I've ever seen in NFL history. The Lamar Jackson thing was one of the stupidest things I've ever seen in NFL history because teams should have been lined up at his door at 12:01 a.m. to be like, what do we give you? What poison pill can we do to get you away from the Ravens? But teams don't do that. But I gave you those 4 names. Those were picks number 27 through 30 of the NFL draft. You don't trade those 4 guys for Lamar Jackson? Really?
Well, but the system's wildly different, guys. Because let's acknowledge, okay, who do we think the worst team in the worst team last year was? The Tennessee Titans. We put Lamar Jackson on the Tennessee Titans, and they give up 4 first rounders to do it. are the Tennessee Titans really going to be contending for a playoff spot? Like, that's the difference between the NBA and the NFL. You put Lamar in a terrible team.
Let's say a team in the middle, like the Steelers. Like, I think we would all agree, if you put Lamar Jackson on the Steelers today, the Steelers would be a Super Bowl contender, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. Yes, the Tennessee Titans probably shouldn't be trading for first-round picks for anybody, right? But I'll just say, like, I think teams in the NFL, like, this is a ridiculous exercise with 4 firsts. Like, that's not going to happen. I get that. But in general, I think teams value these picks too much. And I think Les Snead's right. I think I'm all about the Les Snead model of F those picks. Like, they hold, like, how many trades do we see where we're like, really? It just cost a 5th to get that guy? Really? It just nobody else gave more than a 3rd for that guy? I think more trade should happen. And I gave you those 4 names. If the Steelers gave up the rights to those 4 players, like in some fantasy world, you don't think that's worth it for Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick? I think it is.
I think the implication, though, is, you know, in the NBA, when you're trading for an established player, like it was interesting because one personnel guy brought this up. He said, look, you have 5 guys that walk out on the floor in an NBA team. And so, you know, just from a baseline standpoint, if you're going out and you're getting a star, you're inserting them into that 5. So automatically you're influencing 20% of the equation that walks out onto the floor in an NBA game. He said, but interestingly, that one guy so heavily influences the other 4 on the floor, you could really realistically be impacting 40, 50, 60% of your game or more on an NBA floor. You go and you get Kevin Durant. He's not just affecting, you know, the long shooting guard spot, right? He's affecting everybody on the floor. And when it comes to the NFL, there really is no player that affects everyone that way other than quarterback. Quarterback, you can stay on offense, can go out and raise multiple boats, right? From a skill position standpoint, you know, a smart, heady quarterback who knows how to avoid sacks is better for your offensive line. And we saw it with Jayden Daniels, right? He really did affect the Commanders' offense that much. But again, it's just the offense. You still have special teams to worry about. You still have the defense to worry about. So going and acquiring one guy is rarely a fix that actually works. And there were, now granted, these were young guys, but multiple people pointed out, well, okay, let's talk about the last time hauls of picks were given up for players. RG3, that turned out to be a disaster. You can talk about the injury or not, but again, turned out to be a disaster. Trey Lance, another situation where 3 first-round picks were given up for this guy.
I don't want to hear it, Charles. Don't.
And that turned out to be a disaster. And there's somebody else I'm forgetting. And it's the Tired Tuesday. There's another quarterback where there was like a multitude
Bryce
of picks.
Young, Deshaun Watson.
I mean, no, it was
you're
Watson.
Right. None of those did work. But some of this is why are teams? I'll ask you this, Charles. Teams, like, we're doing this dumb exercise of like, would you give up 4 first-round picks for Patrick Mahomes? And 6 guys said absolutely not. But yet, Bryce Young, who we've never seen play an NFL snap, the Panthers are like, sure, we'll give you 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and DJ Moore. They've never seen him play before.
Frank, if we just talk about the talent, right, on the field, what we had seen and what he was supposed to bring to the franchise, and it was cooked, like he had done it on the NFL level. You weren't reaching for an unproven talent. Deshaun Watson was supposed to be that rare player where you just gave up everything, and he was going to come in and absolutely transform your franchise. Now, again, taking all the off-field stuff and, you know, moving that to the side, just saying from a strict talent standpoint, he was that was the acquisition. That was sort of the test. You're going and getting what's never available, a proven young quarterback in his mid-20s, in the midst of his prime, who's supposed to hit the ground running and be an all-pro caliber player. And it just has not. It's been beyond a disaster for the Cleveland Browns in every respect, both off the field, on the field, injuries, everything.
Let me ask you this, again, hypothetical, because we're talking about Deshaun Watson, and that didn't work out, obviously. But there's a lot of other stuff going on. What would, if Deshaun Watson had worked out, had he played to the level of, I don't know, let's say, I don't think he was quite at Joe Burrow's level, but let's say Joe Burrow. Let's say he played like Joe Burrow. Wouldn't that trade have been worth it for the Browns?
But he didn't, Frank. But
this is a one. But this is a
doesn't make any sense.
Sample size of 1. Okay, but I'm talking about if You can't just say, well, Deshaun Watson didn't work out, so this could
we're
never
working off the
out.
data we do have, and you're instead
Deshaun
you're saying,
Watson
let's
had
pretend
played-
that didn't happen.
If Deshaun Watson, but
say
it didn't
he played
work out
like
because
this.
there was a lot going on with Deshaun. If Deshaun Watson had played like he did with Houston when he was legitimately a top 6-7 quarterback in the NFL, is that trade worth it for the Browns? I think yes. Like I think absolutely. I think by this point,
but you're
the Browns
describing the scenario that didn't happen. That's what I'm saying. Is we actually have a test case, Frank. We have a test case,
yes,
and you're like,
of a guy who turned out to be a sexual deviant.
Let's talk about the test case, and let's say it's something
but
else.
Let's say it's something
it
not
wasn't.
work out because of it didn't not work out because of the trade assets. It worked out because of the dude.
I will say to Frank's point in this one, let's also acknowledge like Trey Lance, Bryce Young, they were rookies. We see people give up the farm all the time to move up to take rookies, and it doesn't work out. And then nobody ever stops trying to give up the farm to move up for rookies. I understand their cost control, but there's only been one quarterback that we've actually seen that was established that tried to be part of this equation.
So Fitz, a little bit of that came out in the couple of guys that said Jayden Daniels, right? Because they said, you're not just acquiring what he did his first year. You're acquiring a player at the beginning of his ascent. You're acquiring a rookie contract, right? So there's some of these things that come into play here for NFL teams. It's the thought process that weighs on it. It's cap. Like if you're going and you're getting a guy in the middle of his career, you're acquiring nowadays a $50 million a year, if not more, cap hit, right? You're immediately signing up for maximum absorption when it comes to one position maxing out the very top of your cap. So I think there's an element of that too. And I think that's why teams move up the way that they do and why they give up the draft capital the way they do to go and get a player, because they're saying, we believe that is potentially the next Mahomes, which, by the way, Mahomes was gotten in a move up by the Kansas City Chiefs. We believe he could be the next Burrow. We believe he could be one of these guys, and we're going to get him for effectively, at the very least, 4 years of light pay. He's going to be at the bottom of the quarterback scale for at the bare minimum 4 years. And then you have a 5th-year option. You have 2, franchise tags that control. So you're basically saying we're signing up to go grab what we think is an elite talent for 7 years. And more than half of that, we can pay him at a substandard level if he plays above his head. But I think we would all agree Jayden Daniels is already underpaid. I mean, after 1 year, he feels he's massively underpaid by the Washington Commanders, and they can take advantage of that by having, more cap space than almost anyone the next couple of years. That I think factors into it too. I do agree. I will say this, Frank. I do agree. I feel like the first round picks, for whatever reason, and maybe it's just the historical knowledge of seeing teams completely wipe themselves out, giving up a ton of picks for players. I do think that they are ultimately overvalued, but I also think, you look around the league and, those picks sometimes get used for capital that you move back and you pick up other picks. I mean, there's the way that teams approach having that draft capital. It's not as static, I think, as the NBA. Like the NBA, we don't see, at least not from the NFL standpoint, you don't sit there during the first round of the NBA draft and see some team move back 3 times and pick up all these extra picks.
Right.
And I think part of the reason for that is, and a lot of guys across the NFL pointed this out, they're like, so the way they kind of tiered it, and there was some disagreement on this, but like one guy said to me, the second round in the NBA is basically like our 4th, 5th, 6th round. Like you're going and you're getting a developmental guy, maybe he makes it, but you really have no idea what you're getting. I had another guy who was like, no way. The second round is the 7th round. Like it's not even remotely close. And the guy who said it's the 7th round, he pointed out, he said, look, after the top 15 picks, good luck. He's like, you have no idea what you're getting on the NBA level. And he said, at least in the NFL, he felt like there's a little more of a solid chance that you're getting a long-term starter after the 15th pick in the draft. Like he was like, you can't really compare the picks between the NBA and the NFL because they're so vastly different in terms of what that capital ends up producing.
Now, I think the one example, go back to would this have worked out had he played at a certain level? I think a Matthew Stafford trade is kind of I don't know why that didn't change more, because that was as far as I looked it up real quick, so I might get some of the details wrong. The Rams gave up obviously Jared Goff. He is considered a throw-in, but they also gave up 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and 2 thirds. and they won a Super Bowl. Like that, I don't know. Like again, I thought the Rams model was going to take off a little bit more, and it hasn't a little in a way. The 49ers have kind of been that way too, going to get Trent Williams, going to get Christian McCaffrey. They've been aggressive with trades. We saw the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, Gladstone comes from the Rams family. He was aggressive to go get Travis Hunter. I just thought, and we've seen more trades. Look, me and you, Charles, we're old. We remember, dude, player trades never happened. Like that just did not happen in the NFL. And all of a sudden now we see it, deadline deals and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. I thought it was going to take off more. And it's to hear you say like that, 6 out of 14 guys are like absolutely dead no, that I wouldn't even trade 4 picks for Patrick Mahomes. It's like,
See,
yes, like,
and
okay.
it's interesting because there was the idea floated that Stafford was the other test case, where it's like, okay, Deshaun Watson was one who we knew could succeed at the NFL level, and that did not work out. But someone said, what about Stafford? That's another test case, because technically, if you consider Goff, let's say we consider Goff a first-round pick. Okay, well, they gave up 3 first-round picks plus extra. But I pointed out and said, hey, wait, at the time, the way that was looked at was Detroit was actually getting additional compensation because they were eating Goff's contract. They were taking on this guy that a lot of people didn't think had anything left after watching him his last year in LA. He was not considered a first-round asset at that time. If anything, he was considered, I remember this, people were like, well, Detroit will bring him in, they'll start him for a year, and they'll just cut him after the season. They'll eat his guy, And that isn't at all what happened. He turned out to be an extremely valuable asset. I would argue could be now factored in as a first-round pick in the deal. But when it first went down, that's not what was considered. But Stafford definitely, in terms of a guy becoming available who's at the, near the top. And again, I think even Stafford at that point, his stock was still a little bit beat up. He'd had injuries.
Right. He wasn't a surefire Hall of Famer or anything
right, not
at that point.
Time. It changed, obviously, in LA. It solidified for him. But I would argue, though, that, and it was brought up, that Stafford is one of those test cases where a ton of capital was given up, and however you measure it then, how it's measured now is different. And the package was massive. And I think if you really add up all those assets and you consider Goff a first, you could technically say that Matt Stafford got traded in terms of what the total capital is worth. If you consider Goff a first, probably 4 firsts. That was probably a trade where if you really iron out the value now in terms of what they got beyond the first round in terms of picks, it all adds up to 4 firsts if you consider Goff being worth a first now.
And you know what? 3 of the guys the Lions got in that trade with the picks were Jamison Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sam Laporta. But I still think we would say it's worth it for the Rams, right?
Picks are pretty valuable if you know what to do with them.
Yeah, that's right. That's the big thing, of course.
I do want to reference to one thing you mentioned, because I wrote this down, C-Rob, as you listed them off. When you talk about historic trades that we think of involving a ton of draft capital, we think of Eric Dickerson, Herschel Walker, and Ricky Williams. I think for 99% of us, those are the first 3 names that come to mind. It's alarming. We talk about the devaluing of running backs, but you think about the 3 biggest draft-inclusive trades that we could think of, all 3 involve epic running backs, and now we're in this situation in the NFL where, Saquon is worth letting walk away. Derrick Henry's worth letting walk away. Like, the way we have treated the running back position, we know is different, but I think when you mention those specific names, it's a reminder that 20 years ago, we weren't as quarterback obsessed as a society as we are right now. Like, that's a very fair, real example of that, C-Rob.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, the league has changed, the rules have changed. Things have gotten, it's 100% tailored toward the quarterback, which leads into why the value has kind of flipped over the years. And by the way, I mean, look, it's worth pointing out, the teams that acquired those running backs, it was a terrible idea for all of them. It didn't work out for any of them, right? None of those guys. Herschel was never the same in Minnesota as he was before that trade, and Dickerson was never the same in Indianapolis as he was, with the Rams. And Ricky Williams he might have been worth it, maybe, if attitudes toward weed in the NFL were different back then. Maybe Ricky Williams ultimately is worth it, but certainly that didn't, I think, work out for the New Orleans Saints. So for the most part, it feels like teams that give up massive amounts of capital to go and get guys, I feel like there's not a ton of slam dunk success stories. Like maybe there's a Julio Jones, there's certainly some in situations. But
I mean, Will Anderson. I sat there and ripped the Will Anderson trade. Like I thought that the Houston did overpay, and it worked out because Will Anderson's awesome. Like it can work out. Like let me ask you, Charles. Do you think that I think about Snead, I think about Gladstone, who's really, really young. I think he's like 34. Do you think that maybe with an infusion of younger GMs, this changes? And in 10, 15 years, we would maybe not see Desmond Bane type of trades or Rafael Devers type of trades, but more trades. Like, when Myles Garrett was kind of like, I want to be traded, that it just wasn't going to happen. Like, they're going to pay him and make him happy. Do you think there is a time, though, where the NFL kind of the mentality changes and they think, and teams are like, yeah, sure, we'll give you couple firsts for Myles Garrett. We can't draft a Myles Garrett. He's awesome. Let's just give up the picks to get the actual Myles Garrett.
Yeah, I think there's a chance Myles Garrett could have gotten 3 firsts if the Cleveland Browns had said, you know what, yeah, we're actually going to deal him.
Do you? Because I still think there's this, maybe from some teams, the Rams, Jaguars type of teams that are willing to take that chance. There's a lot of teams that would be like, heck no.
No, I think there's a lot that would say no, but I mean, do I think that had the Cleveland Browns said, yeah, we're going to trade him, everybody get your best offer. And I think that, yeah, there's some contending teams. I think, Philly, I honestly think Philly might have been like, yeah, we'll give you 3 firsts for Myles Garrett.
Really?
They're like you said, Frank, they're going to be at the end of the first. That's how Howie Roseman would look at it. And then Howie Roseman also looks at it. And I don't want to just say it's Howie because there are other younger GMs too, but they know how to go and get picks later. They're like, yeah, we'll give up picks now because we know how to go and retain picks in other ways later. We'll figure out ways to go, whether it's through the compensation, through, we get a 3rd round compensatory pick. There are teams that straight up look at trading for guys and giving up a middle round pick. They're like, well, yeah, we'll let them go, but it's going to work out in our favor in the compensatory chart. So we're just going to get that pick back anyway. So we're really renting him for nothing other than the salary we pay because we're going to go and get the middle round pick that we gave up back for him. So I do think that we're at, we've been in an era for the last couple of years of younger GMs who think a little more aggressively and they think more broadly than it just being about a pick. It's sort of like, okay, if we give up this pick now, how do we go about retaining that value at a later date? We can recoup this. Let's figure out how we do it. I mean, if you look at Andrew Berry in Cleveland, he went and got Amari Cooper from the Dallas Cowboys and then dealt him away a couple of years later to the Buffalo Bills for more than he actually paid for Amari Cooper. Now, he paid the salary of Amari Cooper for a couple of years, but in terms of the draft pick compensation, he ended up getting more on the tail end after having Cooper out on the field performing for a couple of seasons.
Was it also, I think it was before Berry, but the Brock Osweiler salary dump trade?
Yeah.
Because I thought that was going to take off a little bit because that was like, that's really creative.
Yeah,
like,
you sold off. You basically...
we want to get out of this contract, so we'll
and you
give you a
second round pick to it. Yeah,
right. That really is not taken off. Do you think that might happen a little bit more? It hasn't yet, but it makes so much sense
that when it
these
happened?
teams with oodles.
I mean, the league. I don't think the league ever took like an official stance on it, but yeah, behind closed doors, you don't want to sell.
Like
you don't see teams selling.
But you see it all the time in other sports.
Loss.
You see it all the time in other sports. It happens. The Rockies traded.
Even in the Bane deal, one GM pointed out to me, he's like, well, it's not really. He said it's not really 4 firsts because part of that was you're taking on Cantavius Caldwell-Pope's salary. So part of it was buying a pick
you see
by taking on the salary.
All the time in the NBA.
Yeah, right. It happens all the time in the NBA. It definitely is not as prevalent in the NFL. And honestly, that's probably a little surprising at this point. You would have thought the NFL had figured out how to navigate selling off salary a little more easily than they have.
I think, guys, too, at some point, as we put a bow on this, we have to acknowledge that every team is in a different situation. It's a little like your bank account. Like, my God, there's been times in life where I could take a vacation and not worry. I could be aggressive in those times. There's been times in my life where every credit card was maxed and I wasn't sure if I could afford dog food. Can't be aggressive in those situations, right? Like, if you are a perennially terrible football team, trading away a ton of draft picks to get Josh Allen is a waste because you won't have the infrastructure to support him and you need to get better brick by brick. Like, there are teams, like you mentioned the Eagles earlier, C-Rob, but when you're in a Super Bowl window, hell, be aggressive. Rob Peter to pay Paul. Do whatever it takes to make sure that you get yourself into that window.
I wasn't going to bring this up, but actually it was a funny moment. And then later I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to include that in what I'm writing. So another executive said to me, maybe you're thinking about this wrong. He said, you're asking, is there anybody in the NFL that's worth 4 first-round picks? He was like, yeah, there is. Probably Howie Roseman. How come no one's offering up 4 first-round picks for Howie Roseman? Maybe Les Snead. Why is no one offering? What about Kevin O'Connell? Maybe Kevin O'Connell's worth 4. He's like, maybe it's not necessarily a player. Like, if you have a general manager who knows how to build and spend the picks wisely and navigate the cap, that guy might actually be worth more than Patrick Mahomes. And I was like, man, is Howie Roseman worth more than Patrick Mahomes? Like, maybe. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, there's also no salaries involved. That's why I've always been like, why don't teams pay more to NFL coaches? We're like, oh my God, Ben Johnson got $15 million a year when you're paying like some, Dan Moore Jr. is getting paid $25 million. Are you telling me Dan Moore Jr. is really that much more valuable than Ben Johnson when you have no salary cap for coaches? Like,
I mean, Frank has converted me on this one. Frank has converted me 100%. Like, if my team sucks, I'm just going to turn around. My team does suck. I want my team to just turn around, go to Howie Roseman and be like, you know what? I'll give you $50 million a year to run my football team. There's got like $1 Million Man, 80s wrestling. Everybody's got a price. I find Howie Roseman's price. I don't care. Then I go to Andy Reid and I'm like, you want $100 million bucks? Cool. Come on. Because I don't care how my rich owners spend their money. I just want my team not to suck anymore, guys. So like, if I'm an owner, the one variable I can control, as Frank has taught me, with no salary cap, is front office and coaching. Let's go. We just do this.
I just love trades, and I think I wish there would be more of them, because I think it will change. I think with this new wave of general managers, I think teams are going to be less like clutching their draft picks, like their gold. Like, I'm going to hit every single draft pick, and they're all going to become stars. I think we're going to see more guys. I'll take the sure thing. I'll take the Myles Garrett.
Don't you think the young general managers, for it to actually change, they have to be willing to give up great veteran players? Like, that's my thing. It's like, it can't just be about the picks. It's got to be about the players too. Like, there was a time when Miami sent Laramie Tunsil to Houston, right? And when we were like, yeah, you don't trade.
Yeah. And then Bill O'Brien was shocked when Laramie
tackles.
Tunsil wanted a raise. He's like, what? Oh my God.
All right. Speaking of off-season additions and subtractions, there's been some big off-season additions. We'll figure out how much they actually move the needle. We'll do that after we take a quick break.